All right, sixth grade, welcome to another lesson in science today. We're cruising on to lesson 2. It's found for you on page 10. If you're looking at your screen now, you can see that it says lesson 1.2a. I'm going to break this lesson into two pieces so that it's not too big for you. Let's start with a review from yesterday. Yesterday we got introduced to the biosphere, which is the places on this earth that things can live. Remember, bio means life. And we said, let's shrink it down to an apple. The skin of the apple would be the biosphere, not very much at all when we consider everything. And then we started to talk about how all living things have adaptation to survive there so that they can get their food, they can mate and reproduce, that God had planned for that. We talked a little bit about species, the smallest grouping we have. We're going to talk about that again today. That can produce offspring, And then we talked a little bit about the different categories that living things fall into with plants and animals, and how there's a lot of animals and less plants, and then the differences between vertebrates and invertebrates. On page 10 here, you can see that we're on to lesson number 2. It's how do scientists group organisms. With your book sitting in front of you, hopefully, and then this piece of paper ready to rock, we'll get going on our lessons. It says in italics right underneath the title, the broad summary statement. Remember that is always there for us. Scientists sort organisms into groups with similar characteristics. Grouping organisms makes studying them easier. Many scientists today divide all of Earth's organisms into 6 main groups that we call kingdoms. And so we'll talk about how we sort these things down more and more as we get into that. Moving into the first section, how are organisms groups? With so many kinds of organisms, how can scientists study them? Remember yesterday we talked about them being 2 million different organisms in the world. Think about how a music store organizes CDs it sells. Might not be relevant to you today. CDs was kind of more of a my time kind of thing, but if you think about all the different music out there, if we were selling those in stores, how do we do it? Most music stores group together musicians that share certain characteristics. A music store may sort the musicians by the type of music they play, such as we got all of country in one place, R&B in one place, rap in one place, jazz in one place, old school in one place. Okay, you get the idea. In a similar way, scientists group Earth's many organisms by the similarities of their characteristics. These similarities may or may not be easily seen. The grouping of things according to their similarities is called classification. And so if you're going on your notes now, you can see scientists group organisms by the similarities of their characteristics, which is called classification. So that last sentence that we just read fills in the blanks for number 1. Number 1, as we talk about similarities, guys, remember that goes back to that skill we had on Monday with comparing and contrasting. That's why it was so important to learn that skill. It's spelled out there for us to be able to do those things. Scientists are constantly looking for the similarities that are out there. I do also want to note in that thing that it says they're not always easily seen. Okay, we'll talk a lot about how scientists go down to the cellular level. In other words, they'll dissect and look at something underneath a microscope. That might not be obvious to us on the outside that are just looking at the outward appearance. That's how they group those things, and yet many, many times they are easily seen. So as we break animals down into certain categories, most of the time those animals look more and more similar. Continuing on, throughout history, scientists have used different classification systems. Even today, however, though, scientists do not agree on a single system. However, most scientists today do use a system similar to the one that was developed by Carolus Linnaeus in the 1700s. So you have your points for number 2 there. They don't always agree. Should there be, in your book, as you read on that title, we broke it down into 6 kingdoms. Not all scientists agree with that. Your science book will tell you how some scientists think we should split those things up a different way. But they do realize the value of classifying these things. And it was started for us way back in the 1700s. We're going to see how his system was not the system we use today. But he is the one that classified everything down. The third paragraph on page 11 says, Linnaeus first grouped all organisms into 2 very large groups that he called kingdoms. They were the plant kingdom and the animal kingdom. So as you're finishing number 2 here, That first blank in number 2 is the year of the 1700s. His system only had 2 groups. We call that big, large group kingdoms. They were the plant kingdom and the animal kingdom. Now I want you to go back in time 300 years and think, what do I see with my eyes? I see plants and I see animals. In my world, that's it. And so I hope you can see the common sense that he has to say, hey, everything that just fits in the two kingdoms, it's either a plant or it's an animal. It either roams around and eats things or it doesn't. And that's why he did that. Continuing on. Then Linnaeus divided each kingdom into smaller groups based on the features of the organisms. The most common classification system scientists use today is based on 6 kingdoms, which are then divided into smaller and smaller groups. Study the pictures below to see how many scientists today divide the animal kingdom. Okay, so number 3, the most common classification system today has 6 kingdoms. It's then broken into smaller and smaller groups. And I'm just going to walk through it on the side. So if you're on page 10 with me at the top, you can see the green word in that oval is the kingdom. So one of the 6 kingdoms is the animal kingdom. What does it take to be considered an animal? It says the organisms shown here are all members of the animal kingdom. Animals are, number 1, multicellular organisms, and number 2, they have to obtain their food by eating other organisms. And so we're going to see that, number 1, you have to have more than one cell, and number 2, you have to be able to eat to get your energy. So that makes them the animal kingdom, and you can see there's a wide variety from bugs and insects to the armadillo there and the crabs. Now we break kingdom into a smaller category. The next smaller category they have it broken into is called arthropods. You had a little question on that in the similarities of comparing and contrasting on the first day. We're back to it. What is true of all arthropods? It says this: animals that belong to the arthropod phylum share these characteristics. They have to have jointed legs, a body divided into segments, and a hard outer shell. And so you can see what happened. We lost the armadillo because an armadillo doesn't have jointed legs. Okay? And so that one doesn't fall into that phylum. It would fall into a different phylum. From phylum, we get to a smaller category with class. The class of arthropods we're talking about are insects. The insect class contains only arthropods with bodies that are divided into 3 sections and that usually have 3 pairs of legs at the middle section. And so now we got rid of the crabs, guys, because we're talking about insects that have to be divided into 3 sections, usually with 6 legs. That got rid of the crab out of there. On to page 11, you have the word order. As we continue to get more and more specific, guys, just by looks you can see they're starting to look more and more similar. Now we're at the order called Colopatra. This order contains only insects with 2 pairs of wings that meet in a straight line along the back. The longer back wings are under the front wings. And so now we got rid of the butterfly because the butterfly doesn't fit those qualifications. From order we go down to family. A big, huge, long Latin word, the Coccinellidae. This family contains only ladybug beetles. All members are dome-shaped, usually bright colored, spotted, short legs, and are less than 1 centimeter long. So you can see, in my mind, the other little beetle went out of it, not what we think of a ladybug, because the beetle under the order thing is not dome-shaped. Then you go down to the next one after family is called a genus. And then down from a genus is a species. Now they put those 2 together because that's how we have our scientific names. Remember we talked about scientific names yesterday? Always have 2 parts. It's the genus and the species together. So Conchlineva novamata, members of different species in the same genus are very similar but cannot mate with one another. The red-spotted ladybug beetle belongs to the genus Conchyliina and the species of that. So you can see you have your yellow one on the one before and the red one on the one after that. They have to be a member of the same species to get there. So for number 4, guys, you can see that I had skipped the word order in there. And then at the end of number 4 notes, it says, as you work left to right, the groups become more alike. So there's more and more similarities the farther we work. Sometimes we say kingdom very broad, species very specific. And so the words kind of sound alike. That might help us to remember the order that it goes in as I work my way down from left to right. Okay, turn the page to page 12. We're going to take the top half of it, and then we'll stop there for today. It reads like this: Organisms in the Six Kingdoms. Linnaeus did not have the scientific tools that scientists have today, such as powerful microscopes to study an organism's cells. As scientists developed new tools for studying organisms, they recognized living things that didn't fit into Linnaeus's two kingdoms, plants and animals. For example, scientists discovered bacteria. So I wrote down, Linnaeus have a powerful to study an organism's cells. I'm sorry, there's a slight misspelling there, guys. It should say he didn't have it. He didn't have a powerful microscope. And so the only thing he was writing down is what he could see with his eyes. Then the microscope gets developed. Scientists start looking at things under the microscope and they realize, my goodness, there's other things out there that we had no idea because we're not capable of seeing that with just our eyes. So make sure for number 6 you write down the word microscope. I'm sorry for the misspelling. It says, with powerful microscopes, scientists recognized living things that weren't plant or animals, so they discovered bacteria. Back into the book where we have bacteria are single-celled organisms that do not have a nucleus. Both plants and animal cells contain a nucleus. This important difference caused many scientists to think that bacteria should be grouped separately from plants and animals. Today, most scientists classify organisms according to their cell structure and how they get food and how they reproduce. So as we looked at things underneath microscopes, I said, my goodness, look at this cell, but it doesn't have a nucleus. When I look at an animal cell underneath a microscope, it has a nucleus. When I look at a plant cell underneath a microscope, it has a nucleus. These cells don't have it, so they said, let's add a new kingdom. So we went from 2 kingdoms, let's just say, to 3 kingdoms. We know that there's 6 kingdoms, guys, but we understand why we had to split a new kingdom, because we're dealing with little single one-celled organisms that don't have a nucleus. Tomorrow when we move on and we talk about the protists and the fungi, you'll see that there's other single-celled organisms that do have a nucleus. So we said, man, we got to switch our thinking again. And so that last sentence, guys, in that paragraph is really important. What it came down to is we're going to look at cells to get their structure. We're going to look at how they get food. Animals have to eat food. We just read that. Plants have to make their own food, and so that's another difference. And then how they reproduce is going to be another one that separates them out. Then the last paragraph in that section, it says, many scientists put organisms into 6 kingdoms. Kingdom number 1 in this book says, kingdom Archaeobacteria include bacteria that live where most other organisms cannot. It lives in water that has a lot of salt or is very hot. So I wrote down Archaeobacteria live where most other organisms can't. Now, guys, I want to caution you on that. This is evolution without them saying this is evolution. What scientists believe, or many scientists believe, was millions and billions of years ago, the Earth was this big blob of lava. And so today, nothing could live in that, but scientists had to say, well, there had to be life somewhere, so we're going to say Archaeobacteria can live in something that's too salty for everything else, or too hot for everything else, because that's what they believed the Earth was millions and millions of years ago. As a Christian, I don't believe that, 6th grade, so you got to be careful with some of these things, and you see how your book just puts that in there as a matter of fact, and as you study science in your years to come, science books will talk about Archaeobacteria as just a way of life, but understand the evolution that scientists believe in and how they support their evolutionary belief by having different things like this, which is bacteria that can live where other normal bacteria can't live. Continuing on halfway through that paragraph, it says, the kingdom of eubacteria includes all the other bacteria out there. They live in almost every environment on the earth today, including your body. In fact, there are more bacteria in your mouth than there are people on earth. And so often we hear the word bacteria and we get really scared because bacteria can cause diseases, and that is definitely true. But guys, there's also a ton of bacteria that's very, very helpful and very beneficial to you. We all have billions and billions of bacteria inside our mouth. We have billions and billions of bacteria inside our digestive system. They are all serving a really good purpose. Obviously, if we get too many of those or they reproduce too fast, they can make us sick. But it's a good reminder for us guys that so often we hear certain words and we think they're always bad, and that's not true at all. We're going to get a lot of that tomorrow as we work through these 6 kingdoms and we talk about fungi and protists and these bacteria again, and realize that some of them can be a blessing and yet some of them can also harm you. The last note you were filling out is eubacteria includes all other bacteria. They live in almost every environment, including your body. Just so that you know that they're everywhere and they can be a blessing. Okay, 6, we're going to stop there today. Tomorrow we'll pick it up right on page 12 as we talk about protists and fungi. Because we're not done with the lesson completely yet, there's not another worksheet that goes with it. So that's why your assignment said fill out these notes and then that's it for it. Tomorrow when we get done with the next lesson, that'll have a worksheet that'll go with it for the whole lesson. You might have to review back to page 10 and 11 in the first half of 12 when you get your worksheet the next day. Have a good day.